everyone. Welcome back to part 3, Death.
In our podcast, Fika for Life. So we have previously talked about the time before someone dies. Either you know that someone's sick and is dying or a sudden death. We were talking about funerals and what actually happens when someone dies with the remains. And today we talk about maybe something that many people can relate to. So it's about the grieving process after someone died.
Exactly.
Obviously, we can have a whole episode about what we think happens to the person who has died, who has passed away. But today's topic is more about the people who remain and their suffering. So I imagine that most of you guys know someone who has died and has suffered yourself, or know someone who has grieved, met someone who has experienced grieving before, and so on. So today we want to talk about different stages of grieving. Did you know, Ed, that there are stages of grieving?
Well, there seems to be stages about everything, Yes, but I knew there were stages to grieving. Usually, when we meet people around the death and the funeral, you get to experience like the first 2 stages, which is usually denial and then anger.
Oh, yeah. Feeling of, no, this can't be true. And the feeling of, this is unfair.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. So when my dad, I knew my dad had cancer. And I didn't know how sick he was, but he died. And he had been dead for several days before they found the body. So when my family finally called me, because that's how my family is, they don't always call right away. They called and told me they was dead. I called his number.
You called his number?
I called my dad's number to make sure he was really dead.
And they didn't.
And he didn't answer. I called like 5 times.
Oh, wow.
And when I got back to the States, I called, like when I landed in the States, I called just to make sure that he didn't answer the phone. So it took me, like, my brain said he was dead. But my brain also said, but what if they're not telling the truth? What if they're just saying that to get you to come there? How do you know he's not faking it? I mean, like I played all kinds of weird stuff. And that happens. I think the denial thing is like, it's really weird because we know that people die. But we always somehow have to convince ourselves, like we have to do things to make sure that it's not just something that is made up. And so one of the things that people like, I remember I listened to his telephone answering thing and voicemail. Thank you. I was like, well, what is that thing called? And my sister had called a couple of times, and she was really frantic and talked about, she was like, Daddy, this is Susan. Stop playing games. And
wow.
Yeah, so that was like really weird. And as I listened to the messages of the people who called, who didn't, and this was not just the family, but people called outside the family.
Who didn't believe that he died.
Yeah. Like, I mean, he was dead, but it was still hard to take in. And I know a lot of people talk about things like that. And when they first found out that someone is dead, so we just had a death in cross culture, Mike. And so one of the things is that when I found out about it, I went immediately to his Facebook thing.
Yeah, to see if it was.
To see when was the last time he posted.
Yeah.
How long ago was it that he posted something? It had been a while ago, and there was information about his death and stuff. So I was like, okay. And I went back and I checked to see if I got any emails from him. I mean, just how weird your brain is. So denial is definitely the first reaction, because often, even if we know someone's sick, it's still hard to sort of process that now death has finally happened. Strange. Yeah. Really weird.
The second stage was anger.
And we get angry about different things. So sometimes you're angry because the person died.
I've heard that people get even angry at the person who died.
Yeah, at the person who died. Yeah, that's one of the weirdest things. So you're going to meet people at their home, and all of a sudden they're angry at the person who died.
How could they do this to me?
Yeah, it's
Like,
like, and people say weird stuff. Oh my gosh, they say so many weird things.
And most people, it's not even their choice that they're dying. Most people don't choose to die.
No, most people are forced to death either by disease or sickness or accidents or
yeah. So anger. So you said that people are angry at the person who died, but then there can also be anger.
They're angry at themselves also. So there's anger at the person who's died, and then there's a sort of type of anger that's directed at yourself. Because a lot of times when people die, because we live in a world where, and especially in the West, where we're so busy with work, and we always mean to keep in contact and to say hi to someone, but we don't do it. Because we're always running around working and busy doing all the other things we're supposed to do. And then a person dies. And then we become angry. So we get filled with guilt. And that's where the guilt is expressed as anger towards myself for not prioritizing that person better than what I did.
Yeah, now it's too late. When the person is dead.
Yeah, and so sometimes it results in anger,
Yeah. Anger at yourself because you knew better. Maybe in the sense of like you knew better, now it's too late.
And then the third type of anger is the anger directed at other people because they're not grieving in the way that you're grieving or the way that you think they should. So some people just keep on working. Some people get sad. Some people cry. Some people get quiet. Everyone grieves in a different way. But one of the most important things is not to expect people to grieve in the same way that I do, in the same process that I do, the same type of expression that I do. And that's really, really important to give people that freedom for the grieving process because it's individual and it's going to be expressed and
takes different times.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
People might not think that this person is grieving because they just keep working and keep doing the things they're doing, but you don't know what they're doing at home. Yeah. You don't know what they're doing in their free time.
Exactly. And each stage takes its time. We say like in the denial stage, sometimes people won't throw away the clothes of a dead person.
That can take a long time.
That can take a long time. Or people are into the routine. So when old couples die, one part of an old couple who've lived together 40,
for
50,
long.
6 years, their whole life is intertwined to each other.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the person whose life was marked by the presence of another person, that brain, think like 50 years, 40 years. That's going to take time for the brain to reprocess a whole different way of being with the absence of this person's presence and influence in their life. So it's sometimes people just never get there.
No.
Some people are just stuck in the denial or stuck in the anger or whatever. That's just nutty. But it's how we are because our human beings are so adaptable to their surroundings. So sometimes it's hard for us when the surroundings happen suddenly as opposed to gradually.
So what happens after anger?
Yes, after anger is the whole bargaining thing, where you do a lot of statements. So if we had gotten help earlier,
if only, if only we have gotten help earlier, if only I would have checked in with him, if only I would have called,
if only we had started eating broccoli and antioxidants, or
10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. When people didn't even know about stuff like that. And that part can also produce a lot of guilt. Because what happens is that you're trying to find an explanation for why the person didn't have to die, as though you are the person who has control over life and death.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of a form of the denial thing.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier.
It's like regret and guilt, and guilt together. Like, oh, I wished I would have done this.
Exactly.
And because I didn't do this happened, so it's my fault.
And especially when there's been problems, when the relationship's broken down, people haven't spoken to each other for years. That could be because now you can't. So there's things a person.
It's a control thing to take back control.
Take back control, or
if
to have something resolved. Yeah, it's only I exactly. Yeah. And one of the things I think in the bargaining thing also is with the unresolved issues. So sometimes people, because when death happens, you can't say you're sorry, and you can't ask for someone to apologize for what they've done.
Yeah.
You
It's
can't
too
take
late.
something back. Death is sort of, it finalizes whatever the relationship is. So if the relationship was good, then it's good in death. If it was bad, then it's bad in death. And so that's, and that can produce also guilt, anger. Sometimes people hurt themselves. So this is one of the part of the grieving process, is that in the death of another person, it motivates you to do something to yourself. So there was a Japanese anime series called Evangelion, and it was really popular. And the main character takes his life.
Oh, wow.
So he offers himself and kills himself to save the city or whatever. But it produced a lot of other suicides. So people kill themselves in relationship to that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's wacky.
Sometimes when famous people have died or killed themselves, people take their life.
That's also really strange.
Yeah. So part of the grieving process and the guilt that they feel, or some people feel, oh, now this person's gone, my life is not worth living anymore, and yeah. So they've made that person so important to their life that their life has no meaning or existence outside of that person's existence.
Wow. What's the next stage? Was it depression?
Depression, yeah.
I think that's what most people maybe relate to with the grieving part, the depression part, when people are really sad or just apathic.
Yeah. And it's and that again has to do with the type of relationship. So I don't think that everyone comes to depression. That's the whole thing. I think that sometimes people are relieved. I hate to say this, and this may sound like a shock, but some people are relieved at the death of that person. So sometimes there's a release because there was so much tension, or the person suffered for a long time, or especially in families where there's been a lot of abuse, especially like through alcohol or drug addiction, that sometimes that passing that person means that also all this
freedom,
difficult
maybe.
stuff, it's like all this stuff is stopped now. Now we don't have to deal with the lying, we don't have to deal with the stealing, we don't have to deal with all these different things, and all of a sudden there's exhaling that all of a sudden means now I can just look at the person in a totally different light.
Because there's no codependency anymore.
No,
this
exactly.
person's gone. Like,
they're gone, and so now their suffering's over sometimes. So sometimes there's that relief, but the depression part can, especially when it's loss. So we know that there's a lot of cases where a spouse dies and the other spouse dies within a couple of years.
oh yeah, it's broken heart syndrome.
Yeah.
That's really sad
and that's
too.
kind of really weird. And the hardest grief often is one where a parent has to bury their child.
Outlive their kid.
That's a grief that couples who are married who lose a child often in divorce. Couples,
they
as well as
can't.
things they can't deal with because the grieving process is so individual. So it produces accusations. So one part of the couple
Should
will
have
accuse
done.
the other.
Maybe it's this bargain. If you would have done this,
exactly.
then
And it becomes accusation then. It becomes, if you had been a better parent, they wouldn't have died. Or if you had done this, if you didn't
if you
do
would
this,
have worked less, if
Yeah.
you would have been there,
yeah,
if you would have
didn't smoke cigarettes,
Yeah.
whatever. And so what happens is that it becomes the blame game. So one parent blames the other parent and crucifies that parent for their inadequacies
Yeah.
that have been brought up, which of course the parent retaliates in defensiveness, and now couples are at odds. Sometimes it's
and
not just the
nothing keeps
blame;
them
it's
together anymore.
sometimes it is the fact that one parent seems to be getting on with life, and the other parent is stuck.
Yeah.
The depression is so strong; they're just stuck there.
And they can't understand why the other person
Exactly.
keeps going on.
Exactly.
And you're like, so you didn't love your child
Exactly.
as much as I do.
Which of course
or-
becomes guilt and accusation,
Yeah.
and So that's one of the hardest things. Most couples, it's just hard. It's hard to survive
hard
the death
to
of a
survive.
child. So you have the passing of someone who has Alzheimer's. And even though Alzheimer's, so for the families around who choose to take care of the person with Alzheimer's, life is just crazy.
That was hard.
It's hard. It is heavy. It is really just not fair.
It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
Because you can't rely on the person if you ask them, have you eaten?
No.
Have you whatever? What do you want? Have
Yeah.
you been out? You can't rely on that. There has to be 24-hour care.
Exactly. And what happens is then when the person dies, you feel guilty for the relief.
Because you feel relieved.
Because you feel relieved. Because you don't have to keep doing this anymore. But then guilt takes over. Because how could you feel that way? Didn't you love your mother? Didn't you love your father? Didn't you love your spouse? Man.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to go through. And then I think you need people around you who to tell you that, no, it's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay to feel relief, and you have shouldered a very heavy burden, and you did that because you love your spouse, your mom, your dad,
Exactly.
not because you owe them or they owe you anything. Or so I think it's very important to have this network who supports you.
Exactly. And it probably was different, a couple of hundred years ago when death was such a normal part of life. Then people, a whole village could collectively share in that sorrow because everyone could relate to it.
Everyone knew also maybe the person.
Oh, yeah. Think like a tiny, small village where everyone knows everybody and everything about everybody else. As opposed to now, our cities are so impersonal and life is so segregated from every other life so that people may not even be able to relate.
When I was a kid, our neighbor died, and we only smelled a really disgusting smell for a couple of days.
Wow.
And then his friend from another floor came, and then that's when the police came, and that's when they found out he was dead. But he was smelling already, so.
Yeah.
And we never we never had an idea to check on him.
No.
Even though we saw him, and he was just the neighbor. Next door, next door. But we never had idea, where
Wait, is this when you guys lived above the funeral parlor?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. You guys probably just thought maybe, that's how it smells down there. Downstairs.
No, this smell, I never forget. It was horrible. It was a really, really bad smell.
Yeah, a decomposing body has a special stench. It don't smell like anything else.
It's nothing you can compare it to.
It's its own little flavor.
So grieving, you have the depression.
Yeah.
And then after depression, you have finally
acceptance.
And
the acceptance, actually, you accept the person's death. You accept that they're no longer a physical part of your daily life. They're not as accessible. And that things about their life ends with them. So,
Is it also that you have resolved the other stages?
Yeah, you actually have worked through them and they have to be resolved. Otherwise, you never make it to acceptance. But in acceptance, so once you get to the stage of acceptance, then you could start to move on with life. Because life does go on, even with a loss of someone who's really close or how terrible their passing has been. Life still goes on. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. So, and you really need to participate in life. It's if you let your life end at that point, then you're just waiting for death, and so it seems
becomes
sad.
A meaningless life.
It seems sad to waste the life that you have. Whatever, how many years or weeks or whatever you have left, it should not be wasted. It should be spent, invested.
And it's a cliche, but people usually say you have to keep living your life for the person who died.
Oh. Sure.
That person probably didn't want you to sit around and be sad or be angry or in denial. They probably want you to keep going and doing the things you are supposed to do.
And the death of a spouse. Oof. When you lose a partner to death, some cultures and some people in the world feel that you don't have the right to another partner.
Really?
Yeah, so you have to, because then you're being disloyal.
In Sweden you do.
Well, Sweden you have the right to a partner anyway, even if you're married. There's those commercials on TV and the radio. But anyway, that's another topic. Maybe we should have a topic one day about systemic adultery. But anyway, that's just another topic. But that's one of the hard things is that how long do you have to wait? So I remember once I had two friends, and the woman, she was married, and her husband was chronically ill, and we all knew he was going to die. And then he dies, and then the two friends a year later are married, or maybe it was 6 months, 8 months later.
Oh wow, that's really close.
Yeah, they got married, and so and some people were not okay with that, and I'm like, they're two adults. I mean, her spouse is dead.
Yeah.
She has the right. She can get married the next day if she wants to.
Yeah.
It's not advisable because she probably should have time to grieve. But
yeah.
I don't know if there's a certain period of time.
But it feels like people think that there is a morally time span that should go before you remarry.
Like I guess if Annette died and I got married 4 months later, people would probably think that was wrong. Like, did you have something to do with her death? You know, because you got married so soon. Whereas it was 4 years later.
No one would deny it.
So no one would be like, oh, what are you doing? You know? I wonder what would be the minimum amount of time. I think probably a year or 2 years. It's probably like where people feel it's kind of normal.
I think a year is, for me, would be the minimum. Because that would give like, you even had like a time to come back to the death day, like after 1 year, and maybe feel again the anniversary to just feel like, okay, am I over this? Like, I remember how did I feel 1 year ago? Am I still there, or have I moved on?
Exactly. That was really good thinking right there. That's actually, I would say that's a good rule of thumb. Give yourself wait until the first anniversary before you start making yourself available, just so you can
check in with yourself. Like, am I really, because you can get pretty busy after someone died quite quickly. But when the anniversary comes around, things come back.
It's true.
Yes. Acceptance. Yeah, so we want that everyone should come to the acceptance stage. And I think what also could help is this saying, so when someone dies, a whole village is coming to your door so you can tell people. Yeah.
Exactly. I mentioned Annette. I'm married. My wife's name is Annette.
Yeah.
So just so you guys know, she's not
Annette?
some arbitrary person. I just make up names, when we're talking. It's so much fun.
Annette is Ed's wife, and Jonas is my husband.
Yes.
And I was saying that there's the saying that a village should come around your door when someone dies, so you can tell your story to every single person in the village, because this is how you process this. This is how you make it real, by retelling it again and again and again and again. And it takes different time for different people to come to that stage where they actually can talk about it. And it's not to anybody. So there are people who would tell it rather to some stranger on the street. Yeah. And there are people who only tell it to their closest friends. So it's very different. But I think this thing of actually verbalizing it is very important to make it real.
Exactly. Well, I think discussion is like a really important tool in the grieving process. So I think sometimes going to a grieving group where other people are also in the grieving process, because then you have sort of a shared experience, not the same experience, but a similar enough experience that makes it easy for people in that place to talk about where they're at in the grieving process and how they feel. And especially when you lose a child or you lose a partner. I think a group, I think a group would be really good when you lose someone to a sickness like cancer or some other kind of disease. And I think that another part of the grieving process is that let it take its time, let it take its course.
Not to rush it.
Don't be in such a rush. We always want everything to happen so fast, but I think that grieving should happen in the time it happens, because as it happens, you go through the stages. There's also a healing. Every stage we go through prepares us for the next stage. And once we finally get to the acceptance and we're okay with a person's death, and not that we are like it, but you can learn to live with that sense of emptiness. What's been torn away, it doesn't prevent life.
No.
It just, but it's just a different kind of life. So, and if you find that you're really overwhelmed through the grieving process, you find that you just can't, you can't get up, you're just sad, you just want to stay in bed, you want to stay with the lights turned off, go and get professional help.
Yeah. Don't let depression get you. Like, no. Don't, if you see yourself like that, then tell someone and make sure that you get help.
Yeah.
Because that's the worst you can do for the person who died. That you'll you'll maybe end your own life, or you'll be in a bad place. So do it for the person who died, and do it for yourself.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes when people are going through the grieving process, they don't want to share that with other people. But don't become so busy. I mean, if you don't grieve now, you're going to grieve later.
Yeah.
So you just,
all you're doing is postponing.
You can't avoid it. No, you have to grieve. This is a normal process. We're all created to grieve loss. And when we don't grieve it, it just bubbles up inside of us later on, usually as an explosion about something that was totally different than what we just exploded about.
So guys, thank you for listening.
And thank you for all your really good questions. Thank you especially for the questions about the different stages and everything. And we really hope that each and one of you has been given something to think about, something that helps you if you're in the process of grieving, that helps you to grieve, or for that day when it happens. Maybe this could be something that helps you to sort of mentally prepare.
Share this knowledge with your colleagues and friends and family to prevent people to being stuck in the different stages.
Yeah, and keep writing to us. We love your letters. We love answering your letters. Remember us at Fika for Life.
Yes.
And don't forget to like us. Don't forget to tell other people about us.
Yes.
And let's make our family
bigger.
grow and grow. Yes, we want a big family of listeners.
Yes. Thank you for listening, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments or ideas, please send us a message to fikaforlife@mail.com. Fika, Fika. This was the Fika for Life podcast with Linh and Edward Thomas, and we hope to hear you again.